And we're going to talk about a poll that came out that said that 51% of millennials reject capitalism. Now that's fascinating. I would imagine that about 99% of millennials and most everyone else in the society doesn't have a clue what capitalism actually is. People think, well, capitalism is trade. No. Trade has been going on since the dawn of consciousness. Capitalism is corporations. It's like, no, you can have corporations without capitalism. That's called fascism, where corporations front the trade, but governments profit from the proceeds through taxes and controls. And there's a black market even in socialist countries. Is that capitalism? People don't really have a clue what capitalism is. So don't worry, in less than 10 minutes, I will get you completely illuminated and then blow your mind. So capitalism is private property and enforcement of contracts. It's really all it is. Private property and enforcement of contracts. Now, there are lots of effects of those sort of basic principles. So it's you keep your stuff, keep your word. That's all you have. Keep your stuff, keep your word. And that is really the only essential aspects to capitalism. This leads to a whole bunch of other stuff. But private property rights and contract enforcement, that is all there is about capitalism. And the funny thing is it's not even that abstract or that complicated. It's exactly what you were told in kindergarten. Don't grab other people's stuff and don't lie to people, right? Because breaking contracts is a form of lying. Or you make a contract, and then if you don't fulfill on it, and you could, let's assume, then you lied in terms of getting the contract. So keep your word, keep your stuff. It's really that simple. Look, we're at 2 minutes and I've already explained the entirety of capitalism. Now, I personally am not a huge fan of what are called corporations at the moment. So corporations these days are legal fictions that are set up by governments. And what they do is they allow for individuals to hoover up profits out of this legal fiction called a corporation, but losses don't go back the same way. So you can make a lot of money out of a corporation. You can go buy a $10 million house, but then if your corporation starts to lose money, nobody can touch your $10 million house. It's a sort of a one-way street of profiteering without risk. Back in the day, bankers who were personally liable for losses used to be very, very careful about how much money they lent out, how much money they kept in reserve, and so on. Because if the banks lost money, if there was a bank run, people could go after these people's, the head of the bank's personal assets, which of course is exactly what should happen. Right now, what happens is people take a huge amount of money out of corporations. They go and buy a bunch of fun stuff for themselves. And then if the bank runs into trouble, the government rescues it, right, with deposit insurance and so on. So yeah, when people say, I'm against free market, the free market, what are they against? Are they against property? Are they against having your stuff? Well, they can't be. Because someone's going to have to control stuff in the world. Like if there's a house there and people want it, the government can come in and say, well, you didn't pay your property taxes because the government is the ultimate landlord. You don't actually own things in the modern West. You have a titular ownership as long as you keep paying your rent called your property taxes. And so the government can say, well, you didn't pay your property tax, so we're going to come and take your house. But then it's not like there's no property ownership. It's just the government now, quote, owns your house, or the bank owns your house, or whatever it is. So there's going to be ownership of stuff no matter what. It's either going to be ownership based upon personally earning it, building it, trading for it in a voluntary mechanism, or it's going to be ownership based upon surrendering control over property at the point of a gun, which is what the government does whenever it takes over property. It's pointing a gun at you and saying, hand over your property or else, which, absent uniform is called something quite different in a dark alley. So that's the free market. That's capitalism in a nutshell. You've got keep your word, keep your stuff. Now, why don't you know this? Well, because your education was run by the government, and the government does not want you to know about the free market, because then you're going to look at the free market, you're going to look at the government, and you're going to say one of these is civilized and one of these is not. So think back on the 12 plus years you spent in government education through to the end of high school. Think of all of that and ask yourself, keep your word, keep your stuff. Why don't I know this? This took less than 10 minutes. You were in for 12 years. Think about that.